EDUC 665. Today we will look into the 5 pillars of reading. Our first learning target for the day is, I can name the 5 pillars of reading and discuss their contributions to learning to read. Our second learning target is, I can create a paraphrasing activity that supports comprehension of a text. This is an important instructional strategy that you can leverage to develop literacy in your particular discipline. In 1997, Congress asked NICHD, through its Child Development and Behavior Branch, to work with the U.S. Department of Education to establish a national reading panel that would evaluate existing research and evidence to find the best way of teaching children to read. Specifically, Congress asked the panel to review all the research available, more than 100,000 reading studies on how children learn to read, determine the most effective evidence-based methods for teaching children to read, describe which methods of reading instruction are ready for use in the classroom and recommend ways of getting this information into schools, suggest a plan for additional research in reading development and instruction. The panel considered roughly 100,000 reading studies published since 1966 and another 10,000 published before that time. From this pool, the panel selected several hundred studies for its review and analysis. The National Reading Panel's analysis made it clear that the best approach to teach and provide reading instruction is one that incorporates the following: explicit instruction in phonemic awareness, systematic phonics instruction, methods to improve fluency, and ways to enhance comprehension. Effective instructional programs and materials emphasize the 5 essential components of effective reading instruction, which are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. While these 5 pillars of reading are critical to the process of reading, they do situate the pillar of comprehension as one facet of reading, rather than the goal of reading, which is to make meaning from text. So, we might choose to look at it this way instead. Each and every pillar is in the service of comprehension. Phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency serve comprehension as students become increasingly accurate, fluent readers. Background knowledge, oral language, and writing assume their rightful place. Reading and writing depend on much of the same information: knowledge of spelling patterns, text organization, vocabulary. Learning to read and write simultaneously can give children an advantage. Writing proficiency in composing words and sentences has been found to be connected to reading achievement. And the need for students to acquire a repertoire of metacognitive strategies to use. Let's briefly discuss this paraphrasing activity through a read, paraphrase, sort. We'll do this through the lens of a 5 pillars challenge. You'll want to make sure and model this process for your students and remain adamant about the inclusion of the paraphrasing step for each item. Be vigilant that the participants are doing this step. First, distribute cards or items to be read evenly amongst the group. Read one piece of information at a time. One student will read it aloud. Another student then will jump in and paraphrase that very piece of information. Collaboratively, the next step is to determine the best fit for this information and place it in that category. Then, the group will repeat steps 2 through 4, the read the information, paraphrase, and collaboratively determine the best fit for all of the remaining pieces of information. Here you see the 5 pillars of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, as mentioned by the National Reading Panel 2000. We will utilize these categories for the items of best fit as we look into the instructional strategy read, paraphrase, sort. First, have one student read the item aloud. Direct instruction helps students learn difficult words, such as words that represent complex concepts that are not part of the student's everyday experiences. Now have another student paraphrase. For example, explicit instruction supports student understanding of difficult words and helps them to understand the very concepts that represent those terms and with which they are affiliated that aren't already part of their understanding. Then we would think about, into which category might this best belong? Well, I see difficult words, I see direct instruction and complex concepts. Then I see words as actually repeated. So let's temporarily put that one in vocabulary. Let's proceed with item 2. Students focus on combining or blending the separate sounds in a word to say the word, for example, p, map. Now another student paraphrases. Students will work to put together or blend the sounds, which are known as phonemes, together to say a word like map. And then we would place that into one of the categories, and since it's sounds in words, is that phonemic awareness or phonics? I'm not sure. What do you think, group? Well, okay, let's go with phonemic awareness then. Let's read the next item aloud. Students systematically and routinely hone their knowledge of the relationships between the letters, graphemes, of written language and the individual sounds, phonemes, of a spoken language. To paraphrase, students routinely and in an organized way work to develop an understanding of how the letters and sounds in words go together. Well, if it's letters and sounds, I'm thinking letters and sounds. So that's how they look when you write them or you read them? I think so. I think that's phonics. Let's put that there. On with our fourth item. To read with expression, readers must be able to divide the text into meaningful chunks. And now another student would paraphrase this information. So, in order to proceed with prosody, any reader must be able to divvy up whatever text they're reading into meaningful parts. If we're going to read with expression, read with expression, read with expression. So that's how you sound, and you want to make sure it flows well. So maybe this is fluency. And our last example in the 5 Pillars Challenge. Summarizing requires students to determine what is important in what they are reading, to condense this information, and to put it into their own words. To paraphrase. In order to synthesize the key aspects of what a student reads and to narrow it down into its essential parts and put it into their own words, students need to learn to summarize. Well, as I think that out, it's hard to summarize something you don't understand. So I'm leaning toward comprehension. Let's put that one in that category for now. Verify. Now you might employ the jigsaw strategy to use textual evidence to check categorization. First, take out the text. In this example, that would include a 2-sided reading on each of the pillars. Identify who would be responsible for reading which pillar, direct the student to read the appointed text, and then use that text to verify the placement of each piece of information. Later, based on the text, discuss the information each student found and then make any necessary changes to category placement. The reading rope, Scarborough 2001, consists of lower and upper strands. The word recognition strands, phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition of familiar words, work together as the reader becomes accurate, fluent, and increasingly automatic with repetition and practice. Concurrently, the language comprehension strands, background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge, reinforce one another, and then weave together with the word recognition strands to produce a skilled reader. This definitely does not happen overnight. It requires instruction and much practice over time. Now, turn in your course resource packet to the 5 Pillars of Reading table. Phonemic Awareness teaches kids to hear and manipulate the separable sounds in words. We begin by kindergarten and continue until students can fully segment and blend words, cat, for example, as k, a, t, and k, a, t, for example, as cat. A child's evolving ability to hear, discriminate, segment, and manipulate the phonemes in words help pave the way for critical insight that words are made up of sounds. Most students benefit from approximately 20 hours of phonemic awareness instruction. That is, 15 minutes a day for a semester. Some keynotes about phonemic awareness include the fact that students must be aware of the sounds in words and how they work, as well as the fact that phonemes are the smallest parts of sound in a spoken word that make a difference in the word's meaning. Everything from the lowliest phonics skill to the highest interpretive strategy must be connected to meaning. Learning to blend and separate the sounds, combine them in a word and say the word, for example, a, p, as map is an important part of that. Phonics. Students should receive daily phonics instruction to impart 3 kinds of knowledge. 1. Master the letter names and sounds. This refers to the alphabetic principle and sounds related to letter combinations. 2. Recognize and pronounce common spelling patterns. Examples might include AIM, aim, AIN, ain, and IGHT, ite. 3. Sight vocabulary. This is the capacity to recognize some words immediately without sounding out or any other obvious mediation. As you can see, phonics requires that students know the relationships between the letters, graphemes, and the sounds, phonemes. They're able to convert letters or letter combinations into sounds. And they're able to deal with onset and rhyme. That is, to identify the sound of the letter or letters before the first vowel, the onset, and then the remaining part of the word, the rhyme. Vocabulary is another crucial factor in literacy and comprehension. We know, for example, if 2 major precursors of reading, vocabulary and phonological awareness, are affected, so is reading, the goal of which is to make meaning. After about 3 years of phonics and sight word instruction, you'll notice that Blackowitz and Fisher recommend a shift to an emphasis on vocabulary building and word meaning. That is not to say that it doesn't occur in grades K1 and 2, but that now the emphasis might look more morphological, which we will get to in Module 3. You'll notice the first 2 items here, where children use the words they've learned, and the more they read, the more words they encounter, and the more word meanings they learn, all contribute to something Stanovich talked about in 1986, which is known as the Matthew effect. In addition, directed instruction helps students learn difficult words, such as those that represent complex concepts. We also know, per Beck, McEwen, and Kukin in 2002, and Graves 2006, among others, that repeated exposure, multiple meaningful exposures to vocabulary in many contexts, aids in word learning. Fluency is important to both silent and oral reading. At the earliest stage of reading development, students' oral reading is slow and labored because students are just learning to break the code, to attach sounds to letters, and to blend letter sounds into recognizable words. We ought to think about fluency as, are the rate and accuracy appropriate for the given task? Wolf 2007 discusses fluency as not a matter of speed, but a matter of the ability to utilize all the specialized knowledge a child has about a word, whether that's the letter patterns, meanings, grammatical functions, roots, endings, all of that, quote unquote, fast enough to have time to think and comprehend. Because everything about a word contributes to how fast it can be read. Fluency then provides a bridge between word recognition and comprehension. By its nature, fluency is part rapid sequential decoding and part on-the-fly text interpretation. To read with expression, readers must be able to divide the text into meaningful chunks, as we have seen. Even very skilled readers may read in a slow, labored manner when reading text with many unfamiliar words or topics. However, it only takes about a half second for an expert reader to read almost any word, and the more established our knowledge of a word, the more accurately and rapidly we will read it. Fluency is important because it provides a bridge between word recognition and comprehension. Research suggests that oral reading practice and instruction is most effective for developing this ability. However, everything must be connected to meaning, and this is especially true for fluency, as we do not want students to mistakenly confuse fast reading with good reading. For even very skilled readers may read in a slow, labored manner when we are reading a text that has great unfamiliarity. Finally, comprehension. Students benefit from comprehension instruction, not just comprehension practice. Let us not confuse the two. Comprehension practice typically looks like assigning a reading and then some form of exercise activity or questions thereafter, after which time the teacher would then check to see how the students did. Rather, we must teach students to seek out particular types of information, identify the structure and organizations of texts, and how these organizational plans to remember or understand information effectively might be employed. As well, we would like to teach students to employ a variety of thinking strategies or even procedures to use before, during, and after reading. As well, teaching students to monitor their reading, to make sense of the text and what to do when they do not, to ask and answer questions, to make inferences, to summarize, and translate information into graphic forms are a few key items that have been found to improve comprehension. Invariably, everything must be connected to making meaning from text. According to Wolf 2007, reading is a neuronally and intellectually circuitous act, enriched as much by the unpredictable indirections of a reader's inferences and thoughts as by the direct message to the eye from the text. We must remember that this has something to do with the fact that reading is non-linear, that it's going to be messy, that we need to ask and answer questions while we're trying to determine what is important, while we're encountering graphic information. And we must most importantly remember that comprehension is not what I drag out of you or what I prompt you to remember. Comprehension is what I, as a reader, am ready to offer. Below are the comprehension processes characteristic of proficient readers. When you look at this chart, you'll notice reading is what we do to make sense. We examine relevant information, think about what it might mean, determine our understanding, and act accordingly. The processes listed here are often referred to as reading strategies. These are conscious, flexible, and non-linear applications that support the construction of meaning from text. Proficient readers glean the essence of a text and organize ideas into coherent summaries of meaning. In order to comprehend, proficient readers also constantly check their understanding while employing these processes to make sense of the world around them. Please turn in your course materials packet to the I used to think, now I think page. Take the next 5 minutes to process the information from this lecture. Be sure to complete at least 2 I used to think, now I think responses. You may select from any of the 5 pillars of reading. Good luck. Now let's employ our experience with read, paraphrase, sort to address learning target number 2. I can create a paraphrasing activity that supports comprehension of a text. Your first step is to select the text. What will the students read? Next, how will you section the text? That is, with which categories or chunks of text will the students work? Then, from those chunks of text, with which items would you like students to read, paraphrase, and wrestle in their categorizations? Now think about how students will go about verifying the placement of their information. Will you employ a jigsaw? Will all students read the entire text, whether a page, 2 pages, 5 pages, or even a single paragraph? Then, how will students synthesize this information? This is important as your brain seeks synthesis of information. We need to put this all back together at the end for a coherent understanding. Your Paraphrase to Comprehend instructional strategy assignment includes 3 parts. First, you'll need to write some directions. That is, what will the students do? And how will they know what to do as a result? Here is a sample for your reflection. The second component of this instructional strategy assignment is to list the categories and provide the word-for-word text chunks with which the students will wrestle. That is, read, paraphrase, and sort. Here is one example. As for step 2 in your assignment, here is another example of the categories. You'll see Know the Roots has all of the items once again listed word for word as they are directly taken from the text. And then the last 2 categories are just listed here without those. Again, this is an item for your reference. The last part of this instructional strategy assignment is to provide a brief rationale about how you constructed this and why you included the items that you did. Please include the category labels as well as what led you to organize it in the way that you did in order to help students make meaning